Today we'll be featuring a very promising and excellent young lady in the name of Emaediong. Emaediong is a first-class graduate of the Nigerian Law School. She was recently called to bar in the month of March 2024. So today Emaediong is sharing with us her story of how she was able to conceive the idea of graduating with the first class, some of the tips and steps she implemented to ensure that goal became a reality, so she'll be able to help budding undergraduates who are also interested in graduating with a first class in law school. This information, her story would inspire you, her story will motivate you, her story will help you to believe in possibilities as you set your own goal for first class grad at Nigerian Law School. So please feel free to share this video with your friends, your sister, your daughter, your cousin who is probably in the law undergraduate level in university, so they can believe that it is possible to get first class in the law school, so we can replicate this success to as many that have the goal and believe that it is possible. All right.
Okay, so my name is Emaediong Lawrence, and I was just called to the Nigerian bar in March this year. So I'm currently exploring, areas of law that are of interest to me. I'm a driven, focused, and hungry young individual who just loves to contribute meaningfully to teams that she works with. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity as well to do this session with you. So thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you so much. So you did mention that you're a first class BL graduate, because that's because that's the foundation for our conversation. So let me just start by congratulating you first. I mean, it's almost a very great feat, because a lot of people get into law school and what we're interested in is let my people go. Let me just pass and rest. I'm not really interested in a grade per se. So, but for you to have gone in there and you're able to come up with the first class is something worth commending. And the essence of this session is so you can really share with us some of the things you did right that got you the grade that you graduated with. So let me just start by first asking you, I mean, getting the first class in law school means something to you. Like, just express a little bit about what it means. Like, how do you feel about it? And getting in front of the computer the day you heard or you realized that it's a first class, what was that moment for you? Just speak to us a bit about that moment.
Okay, so well, before I talk about that moment, I think I'll just speak about what the first class meant to me. So going into law school, right, to me, aiming to get a first class was just a means to prove to myself that I was capable, that a first class was also possible for me, right? Because sometimes we see those high achievements and we think, oh, maybe for a certain set of people, I'm probably not up to it. But I wanted to prove to myself that I could get there and that it was possible for me too. So because I had carried that goal in my head from before first class throughout first class, I think the night I saw my results, because law school has a thing about releasing things at night. So I saw my results in the midnight, and I think for my type of person, I didn't particularly scream. It was maybe minutes later, even hours later, that it actually began to dawn on me that I got a first class in law school. I got a first class in law school, So it's seeing that was just, I don't know if I should say it was a relief, but I was just happy, that I actually did it and proved that to myself. So
Leads me to sort of inquire, has first class in law school always been the goal for you, or what really went on that made you realize that I have to prove this to myself? What was going on in the background? Maybe some goal for a first class in law school. Has that always been in sight for you, or there's something that ignited that?
Okay, so I think it was from a place of, so the year before, right, I had seen people that I know getting a first class in law school. And so it just became more real to me that if people I know, could get a first class in law school, why not me? And I wanted to aim for the highest and, highest best. So in my head, I was thinking, if I'm going all the way to law school, why should I, maybe settle for a 2-1 or for a 2-2? And there's that saying that says, oh, aim for the stars or for the moon. If you can't get it, you would land on the stars. I don't know the exact wordings, but it just simply means aim for the best. If you don't get it, you will probably get just a little bit below. So in my head, I thought, if I now aim for something that's very average, what if I land so poorly? So I just thought, why not just go for the best?
Great. So it's from a place of challenging yourself based on the inspiration you had from those who have gone ahead of you.
Yes.
All right. So I'm just going to follow up. I mean, when you set such a great goal, I believe that sometimes when you wondered, is this goal even possible with all the challenges in law school? I know how tasking it can be. Was there a point where you felt almost like, what have I set myself up for? So were there roadblocks? Were there challenges? Were there times you really doubted if getting a first class was possible? And how did you overcome those challenges? How did you navigate the season when you were almost doubting, should I just give up, or how do I really ensure that I get a first class? Talk to us about that experience and how you overcame them.
Okay, so interestingly, I remember just one major experience, or even one experience where I doubted myself and if this was possible. And I'll get to that. But I think the reason why it was just one is because I went into law school armed with principles of, people that had gone ahead of me, right? So these are people that got a first class in law school. And I spoke with them. Okay, so what worked for you? What can I do? So that was exactly what I carried with me. I wasn't even going to try other things, right? So knowing that if I follow this, I'm following these principles. So I had gone into law school armed with those principles. So it was easier for me, because I wasn't going to law school uninformed, right? So I wasn't starting from ground zero. So I just felt that if I followed those principles, I was most likely going to land in the same place that they landed. So I didn't really have many moments where I was in doubt because I believed that the principles were working for me. But the only time that I do remember that, I kind of had like a crash down was just like, I think it was the weekend before exams. And I was studying in my room, and all of a sudden, like what I was studying was not even entering my head. And I went to my bed and I just started crying, And these doubts just started coming to my head that, what am I thinking? I'm not going to get it. Oh my God, I'm going to fail. It's going to end miserably for me. And I was so scared. Thankfully, at that moment, one of my close friends just called me, and he could tell from my voice that I had been crying, and he just started offering words of encouragement, praying with me. I think that's just what I needed, encouragement and prayer from somebody else, and after that call, I felt better. My confidence just came back. Wherever I went to, came back. So that was just the one time, that I felt that doubt. And thankfully, there was someone that could, help me, regain my confidence.
You actually mentioned you went to law school armed with tips. So I guess it's the best time to ask, can you give us insights? What were these tips you went armed with? And obviously they worked because you came out with the first class. So if you don't mind, can you share the tips you went armed with and the other tips you have acquired in the course of your own journey? So those people who are also coming behind you, they can leverage on these tips and also achieve the results you've gotten.
Okay, so thank you for that question. So I think that the first thing I would say, which a lot of people would say, would be to, first of all, mentally believe it. And that is so true. I think it was easy for me because I just believed that I could get it and that I wanted to get it. Right? I think if I had gone in with the mindset of, I'm most likely not going to get it, I would most likely not get it because my mind is not aligned with my actions, right? So it starts from the mind believing that it's possible for you to, and that this is what you want to get. So once I had settled that in my mind, the rest was pretty much easy. Well, not easy, but it was easier. So it was hard for negative thoughts and doubts to come in whilst I was applying those principles because my mind was already aligned with my body, was already aligned with the physical actions that I was taking. So once I had settled it in my mind, I then went on to apply the physical principles. And I think the next foundation from there was, the advice I got never to miss classes. And it would seem like, oh, okay, miss classes, what does attending classes have to do with anything? I think, from in university, for a lot of students, missing classes wasn't really a big deal, right? Because they just felt they could read and write the exams very well. But in law school, it's quite different. So whatever the lecturers say in class is quite instructive. That is exactly where your exams will be based on. And I found that the two times that I missed classes due to health reasons, it was so hard for me to, learn those topics on my own. It required like two times the efforts, for me to understand those topics, right? So I would advise anyone, going into law school to uphold, going to classes, take it quite seriously. And then the next principle that I would share would be having comprehensive notes. Now, I got this one from several people, and I saw that it worked for me. So, um, the insight is having notes that have all the details on a particular topic. Because at the end of the day, when your exams approach, it may do a lot of work on your mind to have to start going back to textbooks or some other materials to read, because there will be just too much information flying around. And you would want to have, a compact note that has the important details, right? So it was a challenge for me at some point, and this is one challenge I found was having to have comprehensive notes, because that meant I would have to write, and I would have to write a lot. And the reason why I couldn't stop writing is because I discovered that I understood the content better when I read it in my handwriting. I tried reading textbooks, I tried reading materials and just leaving it at that. But it was harder for me to retain the information than when I had it in my notes. And so even though it was a challenge for me, I really had to keep my goal in mind, my first class goal in mind, and I say to myself, whatever is going to take for me to get to my destination, I'm just going to have to sacrifice at this time and do it. So I would advise having comprehensive notes that you can most likely and most preferably rather form ahead of class, so that whilst you're in class, whatever additional thing the lecturer says, you can add to your notes. So that's what I did. And then another thing that worked for me, this one I think I got this advice and I also ensured I implemented it, was to ask questions whenever you are in doubt, whenever you're not clear on something. And the reason why this is important is that it may be that area where you're not sure about, or you're not too clear on, that might come out in the exam. And it may be tied to a question that you know so well. So whilst you're able to answer 1A, you are not able to answer 1B, because whilst you had the opportunity to clarify your mind on that issue, you didn't. So I remember making sure, it was, I think, during the lecture-free week, just before exams, I compiled areas or questions that I needed to ask my lecturers. And I remember going to their offices, to ask, please, ma, can you kindly explain this? I didn't quite get it. And I typed down the answers. And so what that did was to ease any fear that may have remained in my heart. And I went in confident, knowing that I'm clear on everything, right? Even though I didn't have maybe 100%, I hadn't grasped everything 100% in all the topics, but I knew that I could go in confidently to write the exams. Then I think another important thing that worked was having a consistent study routine. And I would say a consistent study routine is important because it kind of gives you balance. It gives you focus. So you know what you are doing by 5 a.m., you know what you're doing by 9 a.m., you know what you're doing by 10 p.m., right? So there's little time for you to waste. And with the way law school is quite, what's the word, intensive. So you don't really have time to waste at all. And I remember going into law school and I wasn't sure about, so what should my routine look like in a day? when do I read? How do I read? So I think I was confused on my study structure for quite a while. And I have, friends who are currently in law school who have also told me they're not sure, there's just a lot to do. They don't know when to study, when to, do other things. And I also struggled with the same thing. But I found my balance along the way. So I had to make time between studying personally, writing notes, doing pre-class activities, and then making time for past questions and answers. So I knew that, going through past questions was important. I think this is also another principle that worked for me that I would also share with this one, right? So I had gotten the advice from several people that make sure, you treat past questions. So past questions are very important, but I didn't do past questions from the beginning because we hadn't yet been taught a lot of things. So I began past questions at a much later stage, right? So my routine consisted of, classes, reading my notes, and then making time for past questions every day, right? So another principle that works for me and that I think is also very important is having accountability groups, what people may call study groups. And this is important because there are different ways that this worked for me. I remember trying to learn the rules of professional conduct. There are about 57 or 60 rules in the RPC. And I began learning it on my own. But what I discovered was I wasn't consistent. I would start and stop. I would not remember some rules. But once I formed a study group, and we were 6 in our study group, we started learning the RPC together. So every night, because every night we treated past questions. So every night after our treating past questions, we would then begin to recite the rules of the rules of professional conduct. So we would go rule 1, recite what it is. It is rule 2, recite what it is, until we got to about rule 50 something. And that's what coming together with other people will do for you. It will keep you accountable. It will help you get to your goal much faster. Another thing that the study group did for me was in the area of past questions. So I knew that past questions was very important because it helps you understand how the lecturers, examine students, what areas or how they ask questions. It also gives you confidence going to the exams, knowing that, so this is how they even ask questions. There's probably nothing they want to bring out. I'm more confident than if I didn't even do past questions. And so every night by 9 p.m., myself and my study group would come together in one of our rooms and treat past questions. So the past questions we treated was from about 2017 to 2022. And I remember that we went through those past questions 2 times, right? So we would treat them every night. And when it came to drafting, which was, probably like drafting of pleadings and applications, we would actually do them, write them out. And then our weekends were for going through multiple choice questions. So those are the 2 things that the study groups did for me, right? Because if I did them on my own, I would most likely not have been consistent. And then I would have lost out on that area of studying that was important. And then I think this one I didn't get from my friends that went the year before me, but I got from my mom, and it was to rest when you are tired. And for someone like me, and maybe for other people who just like to keep moving and moving, I found that when you want to keep moving when you're tired, you're not going to get a lot done. So when you're reading and it isn't quite making sense to you anymore, the best what's it called, time management hack that you can do at that point is to drop the notes and rest. In that moment of resting, it's not a wasted time. I think it's time you're using to rebuild yourself, such that when you're done resting, you can then move with even more zest, right? So I think winding down to the principles that worked for me, this is connected to the first one about attending classes, is paying rapt attention in classes. Because the thing is, you might want to read textbooks and materials, but textbooks and materials are quite broad. And sometimes these textbooks don't just address the syllabus for law school. They also address things that are done beyond law school. And you wouldn't want to waste time reading everything. So when you listen attentively in class, you're able to understand or know those areas that the lecturers hold dear, and you kind of know areas that they're probably most likely going to examine you on. So I do hope that these principles and insights that I've shared would be useful to anyone who is coming, behind me to go into law school journey, or who is currently, in law school.
So I was just going to ask a follow-up question because you mentioned initially you struggled with setting out a routine for your studying and your day-to-day activities, and then eventually you found a balance. Can you talk us through how you got that balance and graphically work out what you were doing like daily for, let's say, from 9 to 10? Just give us that rundown so people who also need an idea on how to structure their plan for day-to-day activities in law school, they can have an idea on how to work it out.
Okay, thank you so much. So, in arriving at my final study routine, it did take a while. And I think it was me simply trying things that worked and finding, okay, this doesn't work, let me drop it. So I kept, refining and refining. So I got to a good point. And one thing that helped me get to that good point was having my notes ready before class. So what was slowing me down, was a burden to me, was the fact that I needed to have complete notes. With the way law school is, once a topic has been treated for a day, you have moved to a completely different topic in a different course the following day. So there's really no time for you to go back to try to arrange your notes. You have to keep piling them up, so maybe you have holidays that you can go back to redo them. But once, externship came and I began writing notes ahead of class, then when we returned from externship, I used the 2 weeks break that we had before lecture started to write a lot of notes ahead of class. So once I had my notes ready, for classes, it made my routine so much easier. So this is kind of like a mental rundown, or a physical, a rundown of my study, of my routine. So I wake up quite early. I'm an early riser, and because classes, I want to remember what time classes started. Classes started by 8, if I remember correctly, 8 or 9. I would wake up quite early, and then I would go to class very early. I left my hostel very early to class, and one reason was I wanted to sit at the front. So in university, I wasn't really, or even normally when I go anywhere, I'm not really one to go to the very front to sit. I like to be so in the middle, at the back. But I think before law school, I realized that I wanted to sit in front because I wanted to pay rapt attention. Like, I wanted to be looking at the lecturer like this, so that my focus is not lost. There were no distractions for me. And so from beginning to the very end, I used to sit on the second row. And we had like a community amongst ourselves. We always sat together. So I would get to class very early so that I can sit at the front. In class, we had classes up till about 1:30. Yes, in Kano, I went to Kano campus. So classes ended by 1:30. So I would be in class from around 7 to 1:30. Now we had break time for about 30 minutes. So break time was the time for me to relax myself. And most times I was always in class during break. I was most likely going through my pre-class, completing my pre-class, getting ready for the task segment. Then when classes end, I would go back to the hostel. So my room was super comfortable for me. We were just two in the room. So I got, I had a table and chair in the room where I was reading. And my hostel, my particular floor, was quite quiet as well. So I was super happy about that. It was a comfortable way or comfortable place for me to read, which is also something that people should take note of. When you read in a comfortable environment, it makes reading easy, or more, just flows better, in my opinion. And so I would get to the hostel and I would eat and I would attempt to rest. Sometimes sleep would come. Most times sleep did not come because I afternoons. And so once I maybe rest my head, press my phone for a bit, I'll get to my table and share. Not on my bed. Reading on my bed was, in fact, not even reading. So I'll get to my table and share. And because I had formed my notes before class, and in class I wrote things that were not in my notes. When I get to my table and share, I would read everything that's in my notes, like basically carry my notes and just read and read to understand. And because once I'm done, I'm not opening that book again. So like later. So once I read through my notes, I would treat multiple choice questions on that topic alone. The purpose was so that I can further ingrain what I've been taught in class, and so that I see the kinds of questions that they may bring out from this topic in terms of multiple choice questions. I would treat that, and then I would drop that topic for that day, pick up the topic for the following day, and then I would um, read my notes for the following day, and then do the pre-class activities, which is something that law school students should take note of. Pre-class activities are such an important part of your study, because if you go to class, without an understanding of what you're going to be taught, I think you're going to be wasting like 70% of your time, because you would use that 70% of the time to try to understand what's the lecturer even talking about, right? But treating pre-class helps you study in a very streamlined manner. And so I would treat the pre-class activities for the following day. Whilst I'm treating it, I'm reading my notes. Once I do that, I'm usually doing that up till evening time. So evening time comes, I go to eat, press my phone, talk with my friends. And then once it's 9 p.m., we have our study group past questions time. So before then, I would have I remember, going through the past questions myself. So I did that because I know that I'm still going to treat past questions with the group, but I wanted to do it by myself first, so that I'm not going there uninformed about what we are going to be answering. So I knew that doing that, I'm doing more things that would help me, So past questions was by 9 p.m. So 9 p.m. to about 10:30, 11, we are treating past questions only, right? And we would do that. And then when we're done with past questions, we would recite the rules of professional conduct. Then at a point, we now added sections. So maybe section from CAMA, that's the Companies Act, would add sections from maybe property law, civil litigation. We would just, okay, section 400, CAMA, what does it say? Section 303, CAMA, what does it say? We would do that, and that really helped a lot. Then once I was done there, I would go back to my room. Then in my room, I also had my personal list of items that I memorized every day. So it was mainly in civil litigation, because in civil litigation, there are a lot of procedures, processes, time frames. So the claimant has to file his writ of summons, for instance, and the defendant has 42 days to enter appearance in Lagos, 14 days in Abuja. So all those times, 42 days, 14 days, section order 1201, I had them listed out in my notes, at the back of my notes. So when I get to my bed, before I sleep, I would open the back, cover it, and start reciting everything one by one. I did that for civil litigation, property law, all in one night. And I did that every day. So you can imagine that when I got to the exam hall, when they asked for, or maybe in MCQs on theory, they ask for, you have to supply those time frames, or supply a particular order or a particular section. It was easy for me. I didn't sit down to start thinking, okay, how many days is it? How many days is it? Because in exam, you are racing against time, especially in MCQ. So so that's why I did what I did, right? And then one thing is that I made sure I slept once it was 12:30. One was a bit of a stretch. Maybe if I was, for some reason, I was maybe on the phone or I was doing something, I'm not awake beyond one, because I know that my body needs to rest. My mind needs to rest. If I go to class and I'm sleeping, why am I in class? That is even where I'm supposed to be alert, because they're saying things that I'm most likely going to see in my exam. or things that I need to have understanding on. So I made sure that by once it's 12:30, I'm sleeping, because I'm most likely waking up by 5 or 6. So I think people, I know that some people are owls, they stay awake at night, but whatever works for you, as long as you are alert in class, that's fine. So that's a kind of a rundown of my study routine. Then weekends were for treating MCQs, multiple choice questions, with the study group. And from the very beginning, we trained ourselves to answer the MCQs under 50 minutes. Because in exam, you're answering them for 60 minutes, but you need to train yourself to answer before 15 minutes. And we were always done. At 15 minutes, we have answered all the questions. And this was super, super helpful, because I remember in the actual exam, the actual bar finals, MCQs day, I was done answering my MCQs in about 45 minutes, because I knew that I had a long stretch of time left, right? So that was only possible because we had learned the hack of answering MCQs. We knew how to answer them quickly, how to answer them correctly as you answer them quickly. So I would advise that you train yourself to answer MCQs in 50 minutes or less. So that's a rundown of my study routine.
Like, I'm so glad I asked that question, because it takes a lot of intentionality to be able to actually structure this and follow through every single day. When you got to the point of explaining how you had to recite and memorize the others, I was like, wow, this must have been so intensive. And I'm not surprised. I mean, if you did all of that and you follow through with so much discipline, a first class definitely had to be the result. So it's I commend you honestly for your industry. You mentioned you prepared notes ahead of classes. So what resources did you use? What were there textbooks? Were there maybe some materials? What exactly were you using to prepare your notes before classes? And in the course of answering that question, you can also sort of give us an idea of the various courses you had to do in law school. So, most of our listeners will also have an idea of what to expect. So you can mention the course and then give us an idea of the resources you were using to prepare notes ahead of classes.
Okay, thank you for that question. So you said aside textbooks, so obviously, so definitely textbooks is a given. So aside textbooks, informing my notes, I used majorly the notes of a previous student.
Okay.
So this student had gone to law school, I think the year before me, and I discovered this student's notes. It was because I have the soft copies. And why that was so helpful for me is because, with the way the law school syllabus is, it's it doesn't really change, unless there are maybe innovations or changes in a particular act or regulation, or maybe they need to focus on a new area. So it's the syllabus pretty much is the same, going into a different year. And so the students' notes was pretty much the same thing that we were doing. So what that did for me was, if the lecturer said something in class that I missed, I could go to the students' notes and I would find what I was looking for there. So it was super easy, balancing textbooks which were broader, and then combining it with these previous students' notes, which was more streamlined, right? So I used those. And I think another thing that I can also say that students can try is to maybe check online resources, to understand a particular concept that may be technical to you. So I remember my friend doing this particular one. So if there was going to be a topic on, let's say, maybe mergers, and she has read maybe a particular concept in mergers, she has read it in the textbook, she has read it in the handbook, and she's not quite getting what it means, she would go online and just check the simple meaning of what that concept means. And I saw that worked for her. She did that a few times, and it worked for her. So I'd also say, checking maybe online resources for just for concepts, to get understanding of the definition of some concepts. But having the notes of a previous student who had a comprehensive notes that contains, pretty much everything the lecturer said, in class, was also helpful for me. So I merged that with the textbooks.
Okay, so let me just ask to clarify. The previous student's notes, was the person also in Kano campus, or it could be a note from any law school attendee from any of the campuses? Just clarify that for us.
It wasn't from my law school campus. He was in Yola, and I was in Kano. But like I said, because the lecturers have, they definitely have, what's the word? They have a joint syllabus, right? So and it's very good. So what lecturer teaches in Abuja, right? You can be sure that you're going to get the same thing in your campus in Kano, right? So because they're going to use their joint marking scheme to mark your exams. So I was able to easily use his notes easily.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Then I also wanted you to give us an outline of the various courses that law undergraduates who are preparing for law school, what courses should they expect to study at the law school, just to prepare their minds a bit.
So the courses in law school, there are 5 of them. Civil litigation, which many people find technical. Criminal litigation, which I found very practical and interesting. Corporate law practice, which a lot of students have a problem with because of maybe technicalities. Property law practice, which most people actually enjoy. And then professional ethics and skills, which many people underrate but make a mistake in underrating.
We're rounding up, but I just wanted to ask, like, generally, if you're sitting in front of undergraduates in final year, and you're given a mic and you're asked to speak to students who are struggling with staying motivated or focused to study, or commit to long hours of study, what exactly would you say to them?
So, for students who are struggling to stay motivated or studying for long hours, I think I would first of all, I'll talk about the one on motivation. So I think that one thing that they can do, which worked for me, was to keep my end goal in mind, right? So I knew that I live in Lagos, and my law school campus was in Kano State. So you can imagine I'm traveling all the way, to the other side, like the other side of Nigeria, right? And at a point, I just thought to myself, I didn't come all this way to settle, right? They have a lot of investments have gone into this journey, from myself, from my family, for my friends. And even though I did it primarily for me, I just knew that it can't all go to waste, right? So when I remember things like that, I said, however, I'm going to stay motivated. And I think that another thing that helped me, particularly when I came back from externship, so we began the third term from August, and we wrote our exams in November. So you can imagine we were in law school for that stretch of time. And I remember going back to law school, and I was like, oh my God, we are going to be here for such a long time at a stretch. And one thing that just dropped in my heart was, the days are counting down. So with each day that passes, I'm a step closer to the finishing line. So it's not like the days are increasing, right? They are actually reducing. I'm not going to be in law school forever. So, and I do not want to get to the finish line and then I'm regretting or thinking, oh, I wish I tried harder. I could have actually, stayed up a bit more. I could have actually pushed myself a bit more. I did not want to have that kind of regret at all. So I just said to myself, whatever I'm going to do, that I need to do at this time whilst I still have time, let me do it. And I remember one of my friends, he's my senior, he told me that, oh, you've done a lot, but can you still do more? And in my head, I'm thinking, can I still do more? Can I still push myself more than this? And from his demeanor, you could tell that there is no limit. Just keep pushing yourself, right? So I would encourage students who need motivation to just remember that there is a finish line, right? You're not going to be there forever, and you want to maximize the time you have while you still have it. And then for students who are struggling with studying for long hours, I would say you do not need to study for long hours at a stretch. I'm not someone that studies for long hours at a stretch. So I usually break my study time, right? So I might sit at the table for 40, 30 minutes, but I'm having undistracted time studying. Once my mind is not taking in what I'm studying, I'll pick up my phone to distract myself, or I'll stand up, or I'll do something, because the more I sit there not taking in anything, the more I'm wasting time. So why don't I use that time to do something that will help me come back? And just to put this here as maybe so, as a light mention, I remember, I think it was like weeks to exam, I deleted my Instagram, I deleted my Twitter, now X, I deleted YouTube because I'm a YouTube person. I deleted these apps because I found that if I'm studying, my hand just carries my phone and I'm pressing things, and time was wasting. So I did not want to see those apps. How I distracted myself was I would just maybe lie down, maybe send a message to my friends, or just I just found a way to do something else. And so students try this if they find that maybe they're getting distracted.
Okay, so before I ask my final question, you've actually mentioned a few friends, people who have supported you on the journey. So I want to give this window of opportunity for you to sort of express your appreciation. I believe there are a few people who deserve mentions, people who have motivated, encouraged, supported you, your study group members.
I'm excited that you asked this question, because I mean that you do realize that um I it wasn't just a journey of me alone. So this is a very 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 good question. Um so definitely this journey was not a journey of me alone. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the weekend before I wrote my exams, I had a breakdown, and it was a friend that helped me regain my confidence. So I've had people with me from the beginning of this journey, and I think from the very beginning, I remember a senior colleague. He's a lawyer with like years of experience before me, and we had a conversation just before I went to law school, and he sat with me to talk about, okay, so these are things that maybe did not work for me, things that um what what strategies do I want to go into law school with? And it was in that conversation that I arrived at the plan to sit at the front in law school. So, and I remember him just telling me things like, "Oh, I believe in you. You have so much potential. You can do this." And this is someone that I met on LinkedIn, you know, and we weren't even friends much, for a long time before then. We just started talking like shortly before I went to law school. And so this is like a stranger, telling me he believes in me, he knows that I can do it. And when you hear things like that from other people, it kinds of strengthens your own faith to know that someone is rooting for me, so I am going to do this. So I'm so grateful to him. I think I can mention names, Kamsi. I'm so grateful to him for that. And in law school as well, I had friends. I remember my good friends who went to law school the year before me, Joma and Fini. Um, so I sense, even my sister, so I sent them list of things I wanted them to ask me questions on. So they would ask me maybe what are the types of will? Can you identify this particular will? And even sections, I sent them sections, send them cases. So they would ask me the principle and tell me to supply the case for that principle, and I would do that. So things like that. And I remember even, this was like a week to exam, and my friends would, when they would text me at random times asking me, okay, are you ready now? And they would call me and we would have that, exchange together. There were even times when my friend would call me at midnight, like 3 a.m. She would tell me, Emma, don't worry, call me, I'll wake up. And that just touched me so much. I'm like, you really are going the extra mile for me. You are not sleeping because you want me to get my goal. And I'm like, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. So definitely, even my study group, I think, were also quite instrumental because um, they were really, really instrumental in helping me, in us going through past questions together, and in us, um, going through the sections and rules together, and even my family, for encouragement and for support, and then my other friends as well, Manuel, Omeza, so many people. Let me not mention more names so that nobody's left out, please. Um, I think if you are in law school or you're even on any academic journey, it's so super important to know people that are rooting for you, people that you can easily call and say, I need encouragement, I need you to pray with me, or I just need a distraction. Let's just and have fun together on this call. So definitely it was not a journey of me alone. I'm super grateful to everyone that rode with me on the journey.
I'll just ask my final question. So with your first class BL, what exciting opportunities are you looking forward to, or what are you anticipating lies ahead for you in your legal career? I believe you have some goals you've set out. What's the future for you?
So thank you. So I mean, the goal is done now. Just before I answer your question, so sorry. I remember writing in my diary I wrote my diary the month before I went to law school. I think in late 2022. Law school was 2023, and I wrote in my diary my major goal was to get a first class in law school. And I remember when I got it, I took my red pen and just ticked it off, with that sigh of God, thank you. You helped me get this right. So that is done. So going ahead, I'm definitely open to exploring areas of law that I'm interested in. I think this year and maybe even the next year is for me to be open. I mean, I do have some areas of law that I'm interested in, that I'm currently exploring. Taking certification courses on them, and so what that's doing for me is helping me build my knowledge base, and it's the foundation of me building my expertise. But it is a time for me to learn as much as I can learn, to soak up as much as I can soak up, and to ask a lot of questions. A lot of questions. The future is definitely bright for all of us by the grace of God, and so I'm excited, and with this goal that I achieved, it's just reinforced to me that there's nothing that you want to get. Well, I mean, sometimes you may not get your goal even when you have tried a lot, but it just shows that there is a possibility, and that you shouldn't close your mind to big things, because you are worthy of them as well as any other person. So thank you so very much.
It's been a very interesting conversation. Thank you for your time. Thank you for dishing out all the tips and very instructive advice you're giving us. We appreciate it. And definitely, we are looking forward to hearing more good and exciting news from you on your legal career. So on this note, we're going to end the interview session here.